All right, so let's just start by introducing yourself, who you are, why you're here, and maybe what you bring to the table as far as student advocacy goes.
I'll start. I'm Sheila Michaels. I'm a former school librarian. I currently teach online through Missouri Connections Academy, which I love. And my kind of passion project is a reading program I do during the summer, which provides books, food, and hygiene to kids when they're in those school months without public school access.
I'm Brian Breeden. I'm the clever superintendent that started my 4th year as superintendent. And really just like, I think the last 3 years is just like, with challenges we have with the state, the different things like that too. So it's definitely a passion for mine. It's like, what can we do to make sure that we're advocating for our students, and especially the funding and different things that we need for it.
I'm Hannah Thompson. I'm the Director of Special Services at Ash Grove. I'm in my 2nd year as a SPED director. I've been in education for about 8 years. I kind of had a midlife segue into education, thankfully, and I'm so glad to have found it. Always been in advocacy, and then I just kind of got onto the education side with special education.
My name's Harmony. I am a recent C of O grad and first-year teacher at Nixa Public Schools. I'm really excited. In terms of student advocacy, I think my take is really interesting because I've gone from being the student that advocates for myself in the collegiate setting to now figuring out how to allow students to advocate for themselves in my own classroom. So, yeah.
My name is River Haygood. I am a student, and I will be the student voice of how to show or how to give our student voices out into helping, like helping other people and just having the student voices for the schools.
I'm Jamie Wright. I am a special education teacher at Nixa School. For me, student advocacy is like helping the students learn to advocate for themselves, advocating for the students on their behalf, to get what they need in the classroom, and just encouraging other teachers to build those positive relationships with all students, just to help the overall classroom environment.
And she won the Teacher of the Year, I think.
I'm Scott Woosley. I'm a longtime and involved parent. I've been involved in various PTA organizations throughout the Nixa School District. Currently, I'm the president of the Nixa High School PTSO. Kind of the odd man out because I'm not an actual educator or a student. But I have 2 kids who've gone through Nixa Public Schools, both through the gifted program. They're called Alert. I joke that I have 2 rising seniors right now. One's in college, one's in high school. But that's given me a little bit of insight into how we approach gifted ed, at least in Nixa, and some things that we could do a little bit differently there, and also how our approach to gifted ed sort of parallels how we handle the at-risk students. And that's influenced my perspective on the entire process. And I like for both of those particular subsets of students to advocate for themselves. I'd love to see that happen. And some of the more recent work that I've done has expanded beyond the district into advocacy on the state level for public education.
Thanks everybody for being here and introducing yourselves. Let's just start with what questions might you have, and we can just start the discussion. We do kind of have some questions brainstormed, but it would be much better for our conversation if it's what we want to talk about today. So anybody feel free to break the ice with either a question or a comment that you are wondering about.
Haley, I have something.
Please.
I'm just gonna go back to our conversation. I didn't know much about EdCafe, so I asked to meet with Haley like in April or May just for us to talk. And so she was trying to share with me like the whole idea of advocacy. And I was like, yes, because I'm a public school advocate too. And so I started asking questions. So one of them, that as a public educator, I realized that often we make so many decisions and we don't have a student voice at the table for that. So one of the things I asked her is like, do you have any students that are in your department? She's like, not yet. Do you have ideas? I said, oh yes. And so I started brainstorming all different kinds of students. But I think as educators, regardless of our role, if we're in the classroom, if we're in administration, if we're in that parent role, and that we often forget we want to make decisions and we want to come from the perspective of students, but we don't always have students at the table. So my question is, how do we help students become those advocates for themselves, but also be a part of the conversation, be part of the decision making, and how, like, what are things that we can do as educators to make that happen?
In my position, so I'm dealing with special education and IEPs, you know, paperwork galore like you are. And previous to being a director, I was a high school process coordinator. So at the 9 to 12 level, especially, I always had students at the IEP meetings and making sure to speak in understandable terms. But then started off with asking the student, you know, what are you passionate about? What do you want to do in a couple of years? Let's, you know, kind of forget the paperwork and the nitty gritty, but what makes you excited? What do you want to learn about? And then we can kind of backload the paperwork to support that. So I think, one, inviting them to the table, because you can't hear them if they're not there. But two, speaking in understandable terms and modeling different strategies and tools that we want them to employ as adults. Like, we want them to make their own decisions. So we need to show them that it's okay for them, for a student to decide at the table, no, I want to do A instead of B, and then show them that we can support that in the best way while making sure that we're meeting our requirements as well. But yes, I think inviting them, you've got to be there. You've got to be there.
At the high school level, we have a big drive for student-led IEPs. So the students have a big part in their IEP. We always ask them, like, what do we think their strengths and their weaknesses are, you know, things that we could work on or whatever. But having them involved and presenting at some sort or some part of their IEP meeting, schedules, you know, because it's high school. So we have to talk about 4-year plans and, like, how is that going to connect with what you want to do after high school. A lot of them don't know yet. And it's just trying to help them discover different things and explore things. But we are trying to get them at the making them come to the IEP meetings. Are like, I have to come. We're like, yeah. We don't want to talk about you behind your back. Is what one of our process coordinators would say, because it's all about you. You know, we need you there. But just having them there and them like, oh my gosh, you know. And a couple of years ago, I had a newly freshman at his IEP meeting, and he was presenting some of the screens because we create a slideshow. And his mom was like, "Let me take a picture." You know, it was so cute, and he was just so adorable. But yeah, and of course, he's changed his mind on what he wants to do since then. So, but he's just, it's been great seeing that part of it. Yeah.
I'm in special education on the elementary side. And I was wondering if anybody had any input on how I can help kids in K through 5 get prepared for that self-advocacy that maybe they have more opportunity to do in middle and high school. And so, and it's hard because my goal has always been to include the student just before their IEP meeting, talk about, you know, what makes them excited, what their goals are, that things like that. But with, you know, 32 kids on my caseload, I'm usually running out the door with no time for that. And it's not exactly conducive all the time to have an elementary student go to their own IEP meeting, if that makes sense. So is there anything that you think we could do to help get them ready for that as they get older?
One thing that I did at the high school was at the beginning of every year, I gave my kiddos just an informal survey. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? You know, prepping for that transitional piece. But I think you could even create a very simple one, or they check box, whatever it is. And almost that would kind of be like their written input. Like you said, this is the way, you know, we can't have you there, or we can only have you here for 5 minutes, but we can discuss this. So here's, because then that at least conveys the message that you're listening to their voice and their input, and that's what's being shared at the meeting in their absence. Because they probably don't want to miss recess or whatever, you know, I mean, it's.
There's not a minute that I'm allowed to let them miss.
Right. But I think that, because then you would just have it on hand at the beginning of the year and then.
Yeah.
Or have that conversation with them, but that's always the tough thing, I think, about education, and especially special education, which I know I'm biased, but I am. There's never enough time in the day to do what we ask you to do. And so, like you said, 32 on your caseload. How are you going to make a slide presentation with 32 kids that are K-5 as well? You know, like, it's just, we've got to figure out what that input looks like, which I think that's amazing that you do that.
Well, I'm a slacker on the student-led IEP bandwagon. When our special ed director said, let's go for 75% student involvement, and I said, how dare her put the bar up so high. I was like, I was just shooting for one more than last year, which is not much. I would also, on the student, giving them that voice, asking them what helps you learn and what doesn't, because we think we're experts in everything, but if we're trying to help them in a way that's not helping them, we're wasting our time. So we need to get that, like, what helps you learn best? What do you need to help you learn best? Like, just even thinking about the movement around the room. Do they learn better when they're standing? Do they learn better when the room is quiet? You know, just thinking about things like that, asking them, what do you think it makes you learn better? Or because those are the accommodations and modifications we're going to put in the IEP. So if they're not using it, we don't even need to write it. That's less paperwork for you. So,
and so many kiddos get excited when I show them the accommodation page, when they can cross down there. I don't need that anymore. That it gives them a sense of power. Like, no, take that away or add this in, because I think they can physically see the document is changing based on what helps them.
That's
so
good.
that's a really good point.
You know, I think the little kids too, just having them asking them to make choices and honoring their requests from the very beginning and teaching them that, like, hey, you have a voice, and it could be, you know, do you want to skip recess, do you want to recess, or whatever, and then just honoring that choice so that they know that they are a decision maker and what they say matters. Because I think a lot of kids get shut down for so long that when it gets to the high school level, they're like, I don't know where everything is fine.
Yeah, it's not going to matter, whatever I say. Yeah.
So
So
just
start with the
teaching-
small stuff.
Yeah.
I know one thing that we've kind of done with like Leader and Me, but even I know our sped class is like that leadership teams. And I think a lot of times at the lower level, like K-5, is just giving them opportunities to lead in different ways. And so I know one thing they do is like a snack cart on Fridays where they go around and do different things. You get that out and they love that, but it's kind of an opportunity for them to lead. I think to find their voice too, a lot of times. And so that's something that we've kind of been able to see in some of our kids that come out of the shell as they go around the school and stuff. Has been a really good opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm curious, for our student and our new teacher, what would you do if you don't get asked to have a seat at the table? How could you advocate for yourself as a student or new teacher? You know, what might you do to make sure that you or some of your peers have that seat at the table?
I can start. Okay, so I personally would talk to either like the person that is like the main person that is starting or like hosting the meeting or anything like that. For example, like me going into junior high, there's no student anything there. So I am planning on talking to the principal about adding a portrait of an eagle or anything like that, just to add a student voice into the schools. And because sometimes when only teachers decide, they don't really know the student's perspective. So then they just go with it and go with it without the students, and it doesn't always work out, or it doesn't always.
We think that when administrators make choices. So good. You're great.
And then
I know.
It's true. It's true.
I was gonna say, piggybacking off of what she's saying, it does create that really uncomfortable tension in a way that, like, even in college, and then how I plan to advocate for myself as a new teacher in my first year of teaching is really just honing into like my PLC group and then also the mentor that I have. Because if I can't advocate for myself, in reality, it's going to be really difficult to even advocate for my students, even though I'm trying my very best. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that's a good question though for administrators though too. It's like, 'cause I feel like there's times we ask them questions, surveys, different things, but we don't get feedback. And I know it's hard to put yourself out there too at times. So it's like one of those things you put out there, it's like, okay, now target different things with it too. But as an administrator, how can we make sure we're getting those voices, or how, because a lot of times I think it's more my one-on-one as I'm walking through the buildings, I have more that candid, you know, kind of coming back to it. That's like, we do those surveys a lot of times. It's like, okay, this is just going to go out there and do it to check a box, but what's more meaningful?
We have the student ambassador group that we're working on with real world learning through Southwest Missouri. And we just had at the end of the school year, our very first like virtual session with them. And the common thing that came there from multiple districts that came out is sometimes we're at the table, we're asked our opinion or we're asked to share our voice, but it's not honored. So Kayla going back to it, they were like, but they don't do anything with it. So what's the point of us sharing or doing the survey? So something to think about too as educators is how are we going to honor that, or how do we have a plan when we get that feedback, when we get that information to actually do something with it, where then they feel confident that they're valued, that their involvement is important. So that's something too from the other side of getting them to the table, yes, and asking them, but now what are we going to do with it? So what are thoughts on that and how to make sure?
I know like last year, each year I like do a survey and usually meet like as a group, but I think this year I'm gonna try to grade level teams a bit more, like to make a smaller group, because I think it's just like if you're a bigger group, most people aren't gonna want to talk. And so it's trying to figure out when you're the smaller settings, you know, what can you build do, you know, because I said my door's always open, but it's like at times like what can we do to make sure that we're actually hearing those voices and honoring it too, or like, hey, we can't do this right now because of this, but maybe as it comes up there, thank you for letting me know, we can work towards this too. So I think it's trying to know it, yeah. So I think having those conversations, so.
We can't do this because of this.
Exactly.
When a lot of people understand why, they're like, oh, that makes
And I think that's a
Yeah.
big separation, maybe in the leaders that I worked with at first. It's like, we're doing, because I said, so, you know, top down leadership more. I think it's more of that transparency, you're saying the why. And so a lot of times I'm going back to like, I have to say it, even though I know it, I have to say it 7 times. You know, that's one of those things, no matter what I say, because you don't hear it. And so I think it's one of those things as leaders, we gotta make sure we're continuing to say it. Even though it's like a lot of times we're just repeating ourselves, but I think it's good to hear that message with that too. I think that's good feedback though.
And in that group setting, I feel like it's important to, if you're comfortable with this, it's okay to be the what about person sometimes. You know, we have, I think public school is set up for like the 80% of kids, they're gonna go through and be okay, and they're gonna get their awards, and they're gonna do all this things. Well, okay, if we have a perfect attendance program, well, our kids who are the kids who really need that free Chick-fil-A sandwich? The kids who are at risk and they're hungry, and who is more likely to miss school? The kids who are at risk. Or what about the gluten-free kids? Or what about the, and I know my former administrator probably got tired of it because I was that what about person, but you have to have a what about and I try to think through public school and programs and things that we do, like, does every kid feel like, oh, this is for me? Because there are a lot of things that I worked in an elementary for like a hot minute, but you know, like a book fair and all these things. Well, it's really hard to watch the kindergartners who don't have any money crying, and it's really hard to watch the 4th graders just stonewalled because they've never had any money and they know this isn't for me. So how many systems in our day that are meant to be positive, like, so it's such good, well-intentioned to reward kids and to have book fairs and all these fun things, but we have to have in our systems room built in to where every student knows this is for me. I am not, oh, that's for those kids. I don't have the money. I don't have this. I don't have that. Everybody has to be included at every level. And I think it's important to not be afraid to speak up, you know, and to be the what about person. Well, what about those kids? How are we going to make sure that they're, you know, they feel the same as everybody else? They deserve that.
I know I appreciate that because a lot of times it's like I don't always say through it. And I think that's something as a leader you have to be vulnerable, say I don't have all the answers at times.
Yeah.
It's like it's okay to have those people that you can have your table say, hey, what am I not seeing here? Because I don't see it all. And I think being able to like say, hey, this is what we can work towards with that.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, and you know, you can order some grilled chicken nuggets on the side. It's just, and one person can't think of everything.
Absolutely.
You just can't. So it's important to have those. And if you're not confident in being the what about person, there's somebody in your building that is, you know. So you find that person and you feed them, and they'll do it. They'll do it for you, and they can be the what about person. That's okay. But you do have to. You sometimes kind of have to have a little bit of a contrarian in the room. Thinking, okay, but what about this? Or what about that? Or have we thought about, you know, all the sides of it?
I like what you said about that, and it made me think about a practice that I've seen, where they built time in the day, this classroom, this is on the classroom teacher level. So they had team meeting or classroom meeting at the beginning of every morning and went around and asked the students to put up the number of fingers, like, how are you feeling? Like 5 is amazing and 1 is not, and really like systematically building in time to listen to the needs of students on a daily basis. And then for administrators, building in a systematic way to listen to what teachers are saying, because teachers are going to be the student voice in that setting. So making sure that it's okay for teachers to advocate for a certain subset of students, and then also hearing them and responding to it. So teachers responding to students and administrators responding to teachers. I mean, that's the way communication works, and that's how we get better. So I think that's,
Well, I think
I'm glad you brought that up, yeah.
you hit it, I think, right on there. Like, we have to embed these strategies of it's okay to voice your opinion, even if people don't agree with it. And it's okay to speak what you need, because I think when we were asked, I can't remember your name, our sweet student here, River, I see that you are a very empowered, independent little girl, and I think that's amazing. I worry about the kids that don't have that ability or haven't been taught that as a 7th grader. And so that's kind of my question of how do we get to those kids that don't know they have a voice, or that don't know that it's okay, or don't know the strategies to actually speak up. And I'm curious, like, do you see that in some of your peers at all, or?
I have before. I've seen some of my classmates have had, like, I've noticed they miss school a lot. And I've noticed that every time they come, they've just been kind of blah and sad. And I've noticed that I don't really see them having a voice in anything. I think they just think that, oh, whatever I say doesn't really matter. Like, they never answered questions in class. They never had an opinion in class. They just never. So I think maybe helping them through that would be a good thing. So
Yeah.
Curious from Scott's perspective as the PTSO president, how do you make these connections between like parents, teachers, students in one organization, so that you are really trying to meet the needs of all of specifically students, in our case here for our discussion, and make sure that it is equitable and we are listening and we are doing the things to advocate for our students, but we're all in this together?
How do I approach that? Awkwardly. Having the dissenting voice included in those discussions, I love it when Sheila shows up.
You're welcome.
My current role gives me some particular insights into our building and its specifics of how it functions and how, how the district supports it. So for instance, well, let me back up a little bit. When we changed from a PTA to a PTO style district, I was one of the people involved in forming the 1-3 of the PTSO for the high school. And we specifically chose to include the S in that name. There were parent teacher student organization. And precisely because we really wanted to include students in the organization, in the activities, and to give them an opportunity to volunteer side by side with adults. And that this may be a vehicle in which they've done that for the very first time. They can have some volunteer participation and see parent examples side by side with them. And it's a comfortable, easy stepping stone into that arena for some of the students. Now I've got myself completely sidetracked. How to get not just parents, teachers, and students cooperatively doing all this stuff, and thinking about students in particular. I've got a very different approach than you guys dealing with IEPs and those niggly details, because I don't have to deal with all that. I'm looking for, instead of individual students and serving them in those ways, I tend to think of our organization serving the broader breadth of the student base. And the specifics for our high school and district mean that there's considerable emphasis on athletics and activities and extracurriculars. I hear them repeating, hear the AD repeating to the school board all the time about the importance of student involvement in those types of activities and its impacts on student outcomes and metrics and everything. And there's a lot of support for our students being involved in extracurriculars like that and organizing for those sorts of participations. Being able to advocate for themselves to form activity groups and get the district support in doing so is something that I've made a push for. And I've seen a few students really benefit from doing that and grow considerably as part of that. And not only do they as individuals grow and get additional experiences from that, but the district on a broader scale benefits from having those sorts of things taking place. So that's my oddball approach to things.
I remember a couple of years ago at Republic when students they formed the esports gaming club or whatever. It was like one of the first ones in the area, and at first we were all just kind of like, "You want a video game club, and you want a whole room to do it in, and you want all these computers and stuff." But now it's like they're winning like scholarships to college for playing video games and winning like state awards and stuff. And it's like, oh, this is kind of mutually beneficial that they were able to do their thing, and now it's bringing good stuff for the district too. And then a bunch of, it's mostly boys, a bunch of boys that weren't involved in bringing it up either have now found a home in that too, which I think is pretty cool.
We have a lot of clubs in our high school setting, but did you have any clubs or like Stuco or anything in the elementary?
Yes, so we had drama clubs, which was like where I was in it for 1 year, where we got to perform in front of like our parents and just show them what we can do. But also in 6th grade, this is just what 6th grade did, we had leadership teams. So we had teams where we had an assembly team where they could design an entire act and choose what theme they want for an act. And they get to teach kids those portrait words with that one act that they did. And then we also had buddy rooms where we had the 6th graders, which and teach a class how to do this fun craft or how to do this or that, which also the fun craft that we normally did was connected with the portrait word also to teach them how to do that also. So we just had things in leadership to help the little kids on what these words are and how to use them and like how to show them and just stuff like that. So yeah, also I did honor choir too, so
There was Eco Club.
oh, Eco Club, yeah. A bunch of stuff. I didn't even mention I didn't even mention a bunch of it.
I think it also depends on like each school building as well and the teachers that are willing to sponsor those clubs. So if we don't have the teachers who are willing to sponsor those clubs, I've even heard of kids at the high school level be like, hey, we want to start this club, but we need somebody to sponsor it. So they go around and start asking teachers to do that. And I think just having a teacher willing to sponsor a new club is crucial too.
That goes back to our first thing of like what you said,
there's so much that's asked that's hardly doable on that day, so then it's not maybe that they're not willing, but it's that there's so much on their plate already, like, it's one of those things you can choose, I think, too, as an educator, how much capacity do I have, like.
Yeah, like if I have to do a club, I need it to be brainless and like let the kids just run with it. I'll be there. By the end of the day, I'm like, okay.
So cool, you're on my list.
With that, knowing that like these clubs and activities and all these great things that we know are great for kids are going to be extra work for school employees, and they're not gonna get paid any more usually or given any more hours in the day to do it or anything. How can we form these like communities for kids outside of our labor force that we have at the school, like within the community context? You guys, it's
Like how to
like that.
outsource it.
Yeah.
Yes.
One thing that's been great, the state has helped us, and I hope they continue to pay for. A career ladder came back,
Yeah.
which has been amazing, because that's something that we've been able to add. Like for some of those, it's like, hey, you want to start this group? We'll use those hours towards it. So we do 50% tutoring, 50% towards that. So that's been a great way for us to be able to partner to build the funds for it.
That ties into some discussions we've had in the PTSO. We can't really fulfill that role because of some changes in security background check requirements. And it makes it really difficult for us to round up parental volunteers because they've got to jump through extra hoops. I mean, they're perfectly fine people. It's just there's obstacles put in their way. And we'd love to be able to take some of that load off of teachers. But man, I just can't get the parental participation for that role. Oh, is parental participation also at your school, your elementary school? I used to be the math team coach there.
Oh, okay. We at JTSD, we did have like some parties that we had for our school. We had a bunch of parents volunteer to be able to help out and just be like an extra teacher almost that isn't able to help that day or something like that. But we also had where parents were able to donate to the school. So like we did this candy cane thing where parents, or I guess students would too, but you would donate some money and they would give us candy canes or have candy canes to pass out to friends and stuff. And we also did these cans where we took cans from our own home to donate them to the school or people in need. So
I think that their school, one thing that I noticed, they were creative on that, like Scott being able to be the math coach. Their camera club, they were able to find someone and they just had a teacher sponsor with them, but ultimately the parent was the one doing it, like they wanted to do that. So they tried to figure out how to go outside those, but it's not easy. I mean, and it's not, but like, what else can you do to help those students to still have experiences without overloading the teachers? And so I think that, like, Scott, you can probably speak more on the math club, like, you were able to, I mean, you did it.
That, you're going back a little while, so I'm having to draw from some memories, but I remember one aspect of it that was kind of cool, but it was also kind of awkward at the time. I wasn't constrained by a curriculum. I was teaching them how to compete in math competitions, and it's different. And so I remember having to instruct the kids multiple times, including with Ryan Mann right there. That, look, I'm showing you these techniques, and these are the times to apply them, and these are the shortcuts. But don't do this in class. Your teacher is not going to like it. But understand that this is describing to you different mathematical relationships that you can apply together, and it was really cool seeing the gears turn and connections being made. But yeah, playing the different role of a parent, I was able to go beyond the curriculum. Something I noticed at the time.
I'm curious, we're kind of like, we're talking about this concept that we brought up our first session on teacher advocacy. My question is really for Harmony, but I know that a lot of you might have some perspectives on this too. Harmony, since you're going into your first year of teaching, and we talked at our first panel about really finding that balance for a newer newer teacher of how much of myself do I give to student advocacy, you know, and also what can I do to advocate for myself so I don't get burnt out? And so what's your perspective on that going into your first year of teaching? Like, we're talking about clubs and opportunities, but you know, how would you find that balance as a new teacher?
Right.
Which I know that this might change over time, but specifically, I'm curious about your perspective, where you're at in your professional career, and then we can kind of expand to some of the other panelists too.
Let's try to pick a starting place, sorry. So in terms of like having student advocacy in my own classroom or even within my grade level, I think it's really important to almost embed that into like how you teach and how you manage your classroom. And like with planning for a whole new school year and everything, that's something that I've really thought a lot about recently. But then in terms of student advocacy through clubs or like being a sponsor for clubs and things like that, I'm really young right now, so I don't really mind giving a little bit of extra time, but I still think it's very important to set boundaries so that I don't burn myself out. Like cutting myself off at 5 o'clock if I'm still working after school, or only giving a chunk of my time on Sunday afternoon. Like, it's important to me to have boundaries because I don't want to get burnt out, because I really do love being in education. So, yeah. Does that answer the whole question? Okay.
I think new teachers you are perfectly positioned to start questioning things, because you can be like, oh, I'm just the new person here. Why do we do this? And like people have been around a while, like, I don't know, we just always do it that way. And you're like, okay, you know, not to, but why are you exactly, do we have this in place? And as a new teacher, I think, and it's been a while, but you do feel a little shy, a little bit like, well, I don't want to just go in guns blazing, but find your what about person. Right. Ask that person, right? Hey, can you help me, you know, understand this? And they'll be like, oh yeah, that person will speak up at a meeting, or that person will go to the superintendent, or you know, you are if you're comfortable, but with that fresh perspective and our new teachers coming in, not the old guard and the Gen Xers who are like, oh, I work, you know, I'm just slave away, grading papers every weekend, which my daughter will tell you, Mom, I just remember every weekend you sitting at that table grading papers. I'm like, I know, honey, you know, so that legacy of that, but you have a different perspective, and that is so valuable. And I see that shift coming with this new group of teachers, and you are the ones who can make that shift and ask those important questions and be like, okay, why exactly is everyone doing this? And they're like, oh, I don't know, you know. So don't be afraid to either speak up or find the outlet to ask those questions.
I do
ask
really
the
like
questions.
asking why. That's one of my favorite questions to
Yeah,
ask.
yeah.
You'll be called an out of the box thinker.
Yes.
Which is a good thing.
Yes, I
we
mean,
need that.
that's me coming in as a second career teacher as well. I just like, why are we doing things like this? And I'm not probably as vocal as Sheila, but I'm also a newer teacher. Like, I think this will be my 6th or 7th year. So just the first year, you're just like watching and just taking everything in, and like, you don't want to mess up. So, you know, you just take it all in. Plus I was still going to school at the time. Like, who goes to school as first year teacher? But I just finished like a couple years ago. So yeah, my first 4 years, I think I was still going to school. Smart, but it's just, yeah, crazy thinking about all the things you got to think about as a first year teacher.
Did you wind up going to school and teaching at the same time as a result of the district declaring the critical teacher shortage for your particular field? And trying really hard to get positions filled?
I was a para-professional, and I was like, I can do this. Probably better than some of them were doing it.
True.
So I went back to school, and there were openings, and I tried to get on at Nixa, but I couldn't with a provisional. So I got on with a year left. Yeah, it was before COVID. So my first year teaching was COVID.
Oh,
I was student teaching during COVID.
It's amazing. We're still.
I know. Right? and you stayed.
Did you do it halfway through parents?
No,
halfway through
I
parents
went,
program?
I went
Did you
through the
do something different?
SEACT program
Okay.
through MSU,
Okay.
which was really good. It really fit my schedule as a needing to work full-time and being a parent. So that's kind of why I went that route. But yeah, it was, I think being a para for so many years, that kind of helped me get like the foundation under me a little bit. Plus being, I was in management before. So yeah, and I was able to run a classroom of 16 2-year-olds. So I think you have to be a little crazy. So that's probably why I'm still here. But just, I think my diverse experience, and people are like, oh, this is like, the pay is awful. And I'm thinking, this is the most money I've ever made in my life, you know? And the great schedule, but yeah. Yeah, it was just, no, COVID didn't scare me, but then I was like half virtual, half seated, and I worked with at-risk kids. So my population was smaller. So I wasn't bombarded with 120 kids my first couple of years. And I'm still not, so thankfully, but the smaller groups I think have helped me maintain.
Ready to pull out my trusty questions.
So we have a question on Zoom. How do we help adults understand that student voice is important? Because this person feels like many adults believe the adults always know what's best.
Wow. I think we all know those adults that think they know best. And so I think it's important to have other adults that question them and say, hey, what about this perspective? And so that adult that thinks they know best is not the only adult in the room. I think it's important to have teacher input, parent input. I mean, I'm thinking from a SPED lens of it, but it's so important to have multiple and diverse perspectives at any discussion. Because just like you said too, I mean, if you're looking at it from a superintendent lens or a director lens or a teacher lens, a parent, a student lens, that's going to look very different. And that's okay. I mean, we want that. I don't want to sit at a table where everybody is going to say exactly what I'm thinking. I know what I'm thinking. I want to hear what I'm not thinking. Which I don't think I answered that question at all, other than saying have more adults more, not adults, more input at the table.
And I think maybe even during those is having that individual come with students and let them hear the student's voice. Cause I think a lot of times they think they know, but then like every time I think I sit down with students, I'm like, oh, it's a whole different perspective where I'm coming from a lot of times. And so it's like, it's like, that's why you need to have it there. So I think that individual needs to be with those students. I think they might see that and still don't, then we're probably, it's not gonna matter either way, but you know, if they're at least there, they will hear that. Cause it's just so different. It really is. So.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to speak up and call people out on it. I mean, maybe not in that setting, but I love it when someone pulls me aside and they're like, hey, what, you know, this, I misunderstood this, or what were you thinking here? And I think it's okay to not be afraid to be that person, to not be okay with someone and to pull them aside and have your own voice. I mean, to me, that's the greatest gift. And that's why I got into special education. I wanted at-risk students to have a voice and to be taught how to show their voice. But that extends to adults as well.
I had a student on my caseload. Sorry, did you have your hand up?
No.
Okay. I had a student on my caseload this year that I didn't really see in class. And he had voiced like wanting to like just not need his IEP anymore. And he had met 2 of his 3 goals. And then he questioned why he didn't meet his 3rd goal. And me and another teacher kind of shared this kid. And I'm like, I felt awful because I couldn't explain to him. I did not have examples as to why he didn't meet this goal. I'm like, I have to go by what this teacher who was taking the data for your goal. And I was like, but, you know, if you show us that you don't need it. And he was like, well, there was only this one time. And I was like, yep, you're right. There was only one time that I heard of. And then I started questioning another teacher that had him. And I was like, are we more aware of this kid's behaviors because of the goal that he has, because we have to collect data on him? Is he different than any other kid in the class? Would you notice it if he didn't have this goal? So just kind of thinking like that and telling the kid, well, okay, well, this is going to be our goal. We're going to have it self-monitored where you're going to report. And then we're going to check in like at the beginning of, at the end of first quarter, and we'll see how you're doing. And if we can, well, then we'll start, you know, going off and trying to see what we can do to get rid of this goal for you because you're meeting it. But it's like him speaking up and being like, I don't understand why, you know, having somebody actually listen and being like, I can see his point. So yeah.
That's outstanding, and you may not recognize it as such, but that's the Sheila approach.
Go ahead.
How do you teach students to use their voice in a positive way instead of a negative way? Because we have a lot of students, but it's usually negative when they speak.
Model, model, model. They are always watching you. Even if you're in the corner and you get an upsetting text or what, I mean, you're always on. And I feel like that's, I mean, probably not the easiest answer because you can't always have it together, but you can control how you respond to situations rather than reacting. But that's been my experience. They just model constantly.
I kind of put up like a little bit of boundary in my classroom. If I see that they're starting to get angry or whatever, and I always tell kids up front, the ones that I know that kind of like to explode and use profanities, I will be like, if you need to yell, let's take this into the hallway and you can yell at me all you want, because sometimes they just need to get it out. I don't care if they're angry or not. And I know it's probably not anger towards me, but they need to get it out and to have somebody actually listen to them. And I think just having that relationship where you're like, okay, what's going on? Tell me all about it. And sometimes they just need to talk. But I have found like the kids that do seem to like act up more in class, that approach with them has worked for me. And even when some other kids start like maybe talking or getting mouthy with me in class, they may step up for me and be like, hey, Miss Wright's cool. Don't talk to her like that. So, you know, sometimes we just need to let them be angry and honor that feeling, because they're probably hearing calm down a lot, but that's just mine.
And you still have that control of the classroom because it's your boundary you set. You said, you know, I can't control you yelling, but I can say this is where we yell rather than, you know, and sometimes just that little bit earns you that respect where they're like, okay, I need to feel this, I need to get it out, but I can't do it in Miss Wright's classroom.
I think too, it really comes down to the relationships that you have built with your kids. I had a student while I was student teaching who really liked to go off in the beginning, and then as we got to know one another and I expressed that I really wanted to get to know her as a person rather than just seeing what was presented at the beginning, she started to be more receptive and adaptive to like the classroom dynamic and how it changed from the fall semester into the spring. So
I would go back to, you can't change a behavior until you've taught a replacement behavior. And so when I have a student who is constantly negative or like that negative talk and things like that, I try to say back to them what they're saying in a way that I would present it in a positive way. So what you're saying is, and kind of spin it a little bit in that positive way and make sure that I'm talking that way. And that helps with the negative.
Yes.
And also having them think about the other person's perspective. Like, we're teachers, we're not perfect, you know, aren't we allowed to have like one moment a day or every like once a week? Like, give us some grace too, because we're human and maybe we dealt with you in another class, you know, not just, I just try to be open and honest with my kids but they also know that I care about them, and that if they needed to share something with me, that I would like listen, but, and I also have expectations for them. Like, no, I expect, like, I know you can do this. So just having that relationship and an expectation and a little bit of a boundary, I feel like I don't have a lot, but I do have boundaries. I'm just more chill in my room. But I don't know, I seem to be able to work with some of those tougher kids. And I've seen teachers yell at them to be quiet and they're not. And I can go up and talk to them and be like, hey, can you stop cussing? And they'll stop. So it's just on how you approach it. And I think the more calmer, relaxed, instead of embarrassing them in front of everybody type.
Because that will
style.
destroy a relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they know you care. It's that relationship,
Yeah.
you know, they actually know that.
Yeah. I mean, my own son was like, that teacher doesn't like me. Why should I work for her? When you're like, oh.
They know.
Think about too, when we think about even teachers, like if we're thinking about advocating for something that you need, something different, if you come from that negative approach, you're kind of stuck in that problem. And like helping them like getting to that solution mindset. Do you want to be a part of the problem and they continue, or do you want to be a part of the solution and move forward and help them feel empowered that they can be a part of that change? They can make that difference for them and others. And so helping them, because I use that tactic all the time with teachers, because a lot of times you get the same ones with the same negativity, the same stuff that it's like, wait a minute, where's that happening? Nowhere, we're still in the same boat. But what if we went with the solution? What if we went with some thoughts, some ideas to help make change? And then thinking about that for our students, goes back to modeling, because our teachers need to be doing those.
We all do, yeah.
So then, and then our students then can see that they can make a difference if we can just give their mindset, honor how they're feeling, but then help them get into that futuristic solution seeking mindset too.
Well, and get out of the amygdala when they're like, when anyone's elevated, you're in fight or flight, you're not going to listen. So that's not the time to teach those skills. You've got to embed it you've got to front load it and embed it in so that you have those strategies of flipping to positive, so that you're not having to teach them in this fight or flight state, because that's not going to work. Yes, yes.
So how about just kind of a common theme that we're, talking about student advocacy? What is, to kind of wrap up today, since we're drawing near our time, or actually at our time, what's one small piece of advice or takeaway about student advocacy that you would give to anyone in the public?
Student relationships are a big thing. If you don't have that relationship or that connection with that student, you're not going to be able to get anywhere to them. So even if it's not being productive academically, you're getting to know them, getting to know that person, what they like, what makes them them, and understanding their kind of life. I think that's the biggest thing for me, and it's helped me a lot, just building those relationships, getting to know my kids.
I think we all have a voice, like we all have a part to play in it. We all need to make sure that we have, wherever you're at, making sure that you are speaking out and saying what you need to do. I know it might be uncomfortable at times, but it's worth it for our kids, and that's what we have to do it for.
Because ultimately to me, it's voice, and we're shaping. My goal is to make, to help mold a small human into an adult human who can make decisions, voice what their needs are in an appropriate way, and add to society. So teach them, this is how you say what you're feeling, and it's valued, it's heard, just with our actions, with what we can do in each of our lanes.
Your question was more broadly about how, a message to the general public on how to support student advocacy. Fund public education. If we don't fund it adequately, we can't meet these needs adequately. That does not benefit anybody.
Yeah. Amen. That's what he said.
Yeah.
Sheila, Harmony, River.
My one big thing that I kind of I guess this is part of like my philosophy of teaching and learning is kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So back to that relationship piece, or even if we're talking about public school funding, they like kids do not care until they realize that you care. So.
I would say fairness of, for an example, when I was in junior high summer school, I noticed that special need kids were being mistreated by students and teachers, or one teacher. But I noticed that just needing the equal and fairness throughout all the kids, and even those special needs kids needing to show their voice in, hey, I don't like that, please stop, or hey, please don't make fun of me, I don't like that. Just showing their voice is a big thing that I think. So.
Will you come talk to my class? I was gonna say, I think you just keep using your voice, keep advocating, and you know, we'll be watching you on TV fighting for public funding in 20 years. So yes, that's amazing. River for school president. Yes.
Sheila, anything, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think as community members and people who maybe aren't embedded in the school system, like we all know that student relationship is number one. Well, as a community member, you don't have that, you know, access or whatever. And even when I was a librarian, I had 2,000 kids. So I didn't have independent, really a lot of an online teacher. I don't have, you know, all those connections. And so it's the opposite. It's the macro, it's taking the bird's eye look, like, okay, we know we have this thing. Well, how does this look to this student? Okay, well, how would it look to this student? How would it look to this student? And I think community members who are out there, they can do that. Well, this program, well, how would that look to my neighbor? Because I know my neighbor is, you know, their family looks like this. Well, how would that look to them? And making sure that we're just taking our community and our neighbors, you know, and always keeping them in the back of our mind. And if we have a voice and they don't, using that voice to be able to speak up for people who maybe aren't doing so. Yeah.
What a great conversation. So really quickly before we stop the recording and log off of Zoom land, thanks everybody who's here in person, our lovely panelists. Man, I got chills the whole hour. Just a meeting of the minds, problem solving. We're changing the world right here, right there.